A calorie surplus is not necessary for people who are not really lean in order to gain muscle mass nearly maximum rate. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha. I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. But a quick reminder, if you guys would please click like down below, it'd be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed or following, please do so. And if you'll be kind enough to drop me a comment down below, greatly appreciate that. And on these topics, I think some people forget with some of this, there's a difference between progressive overload due to fat leverages and, actual muscle growth. So I want to quantify that with a statement. And I do get for some people, they're like, well, this really slow lean gains and stuff you talk about are really hard. So what if I gain some weight I can cut later? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying you can't. I mean, even in my case, keep in mind though, when I lost body fat, my legs stayed big, all that other stuff, right? But, when I lost that extra body fat, the squat went down. I mean, and it went down a lot. It wasn't just, oh, you lost 20 pounds, so your squat went down 50, I went from having a, slightly high, just above parallel 600 squat all the way down to like 500, right? With 25 pounds of weight loss. So again, understand though that these fat leverages are not permanent. But I get that if dudes are like, look, I'm chasing a really big squat, really big bench, and they gain some extra body fat and stuff to get there. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about muscle growth here. We're not talking about gaining leverages due to the fat. And you have to understand those leverages are not creating progressive overload at the muscle tension. So we do need to be clear on that. So that does come up in these conversations. People will say that. They're like, yeah, but I get stronger faster when I gain body fat or gain weight relatively quickly, and progressive overload. It's like, but it's not true progressive overload at the level of the muscle fiber and the tendon always. It's leverage advantages from the body fat. 'Cause, when we look at it, what we find is that extremely small surpluses, when they were looked at closely, produce just as much muscle growth as what we would call still a small surplus historically, like a 3% versus a 10%. They're the same muscle growth. And people say, but a 10% is kind of a small, we consider that a slow bulk. But it's like, is it? If your maintenance is 3,000 and you're eating 3,300, think about the math there. That's like 3 pounds a month, guys. That's not, not really that small of a bulk. That's a relatively quick bulk. Whereas had a person just gained a pound a month, we look at that data and they gain the same amount of muscle, but they gain less fat. But the problem with some of that is that people will say the things like, well, yeah, but it's really, really hard to gain that slow. And I can understand when they say that. No one's arguing against that point. Yeah, that can be difficult. But I think what doesn't get factored in with that, and keep in mind at the time this video is being filmed here, I'm partially into realizing I need to get a lot leaner. So these same things I'm going to have to apply in my own principles once I get leaner, and then I want to make any gains after that once I get significantly leaner than I am now, which I'm working on. I'm going to have to apply all this stuff in myself, these things that we're talking about here. So the point here, yeah, sure. But is it a big deal if you end up gaining a little slower? Because we come over to that other point about recomposition. And I think people are missing the point when we talk about that. It's just so you could miss the mark and end up gaining nothing. But, okay, so you gained no weight that month. All right, fine, you didn't gain the pound. Did you still make muscle growth? Like, well, what do you mean? We have countless studies on recomposition, meaning we've had studies for 15, 20 years using DEXA scans, MRIs, all this other stuff that show even fairly advanced athletes. We're talking people with 3, 4, 5+ years of training, sometimes in studies, gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. We've seen it in certain training studies. We've seen it in protein overfeeding studies. You see where we're going with some of this, right? See where we're going with some of this? So if you were to look at a lot of this data, people should realize that if you're getting enough protein and training, everything's good, you can recomposition. The argument being made with no weight gain and still gaining muscle would be, well, what if you're too lean to recomp? But for the majority of people out there, is that really an issue? I get that. I'm absolutely going to have followers who are in that category. I promise you I will. I'm fitness channel and page, right? I'm going to have people in that group. Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. But what percentage of the lifting population is that really? Really and truly, people who are in there in the gym trying to make gains right now. What percentage of the population is 8% body fat, 9%, whatever? Not that many. A very small percentage. What I'm saying is if you're 14, 15% body fat, 13% guys, if you look at most of the data that we have, it's perfectly reasonable to recomposition. Okay? It's been shown in numerous studies to do so, going back as far as 20 years, and sometimes you're looking at the gains and going, some of these recomp studies, you'll look at them and go, wait a minute. These athletes lost a little fat, but they gained a full kilogram. You'll look at some of them. In 12 weeks, this someone who had years of training gained like 2.1 pounds of muscle. Like that was the average for the guys when they adjusted the programming and put them on this higher program than they had been on. Those are robust gains. That is extremely good for someone who already has training experience. And they're doing that sometimes while losing fat and recompositioning in a lot of these studies. Okay, and then people forget your maintenance calories cover that. So people say, well, my maintenance is this. Okay, all right. You do realize maintenance calories has to do with everything, all your recovery, your thermic effect of food, everything. Your maintenance is based upon all these factors. Your muscle growth is factored into your maintenance calories already. It's part of your TDEE, right? Adaptations to your training, because of your training, you're going to have more calories, right, to stay at the same weight, because you're burning through more calories. And that recovery and adaptation process burns through calories. So if that is going through that process, and that's part of your TDEE, your energy turnover, then yeah, you can literally be at maintenance calories and gain muscle just fine. The only problem becomes when you get too lean for it to be possible. Okay, but again, for you guys who are 15% body fat, that's not you. Most of you guys out there can make really good gains at maintenance. Now, I'm not telling you if you go blast a bunch of gear, yeah, you're probably going to need to gain weight to maximize that. Sure. But if you're not blasting a bunch of gear, notice I didn't say you have to be natural. Definitely if you're natural. But what if you're not using much? Yeah, I'm going to say the same rules are going to apply to you. Okay? The same rules are going to apply, and it's perfectly reasonable for them to apply. Right? Perfectly reasonable. So again, the idea of all this is not really supported by the evidence that you really need a calorie surplus to gain muscle at a fairly close to maximal rate. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.